Imagine if the greatest artist, musician, or band of all time released an album, but they didn't tell anyone. That's what happens every single day when brands invest in content but don't do anything with that content to distribute it and reach their ideal audience. Content distribution is one of the most powerful ways to drive success, yet often most overlooked and misunderstood part of the marketing mix. I'm going to show you how to create a distribution engine that ensures that all the content you're investing in doesn't collect dust. Instead, it gets spread on the channels that your audience is spending time and in a way that content distribution only works when you have content that is worth sharing. You need to start there. You need to ensure that the assets that you're creating, the stories that you're telling, and the pieces of content that you're publishing are actually things that people will want to share and read. I know, these are the fundamentals of content marketing, but you really do need to start with good content. So let's talk about something that I think actually inspires people to share the content that you're producing. Let's talk about the things that actually will result in people sharing the assets that you've developed. You see, when it comes down to it, when it comes to content distribution, it's truly key for you to create and distribute stories that are worth sharing. Content distribution is the third most frequent reason for people not uncovering and unlocking content marketing success. Whether it's an individual or whether it's a company, it is increasingly becoming important for organizations to distribute their content when it comes to content marketing. A lot of us make the mistake of just pressing publish on a piece of content and thinking our job is done, when in reality, that is when the job just begins. When you think about content, you need to realize that people share content for a few key reasons. And you need to ensure that the content that you're producing is actually leveraging some of the various things that are actually going to inspire someone to share content. For example, people share content to get the word out about a cause or a brand that they believe in. People share content to bring value and entertainment to other people. People share content to grow and nourish the relationships they have with other people. And people share content to help define themselves to others. Finally, people share content to have a feeling of self-fulfillment. These are the 5 forces of sharing. And if you can leverage these 5 forces when you are producing and creating content and give people the ability to feel like they're getting the word out about a cause that they believe in, that they are helping add value or entertainment to the lives of others, to give them content that will help them nourish and grow relationships that they have with other people, or content that helps them define themselves to other people, or finally have that feeling of self-fulfillment, you will be developing assets that are truly going to help move the needle for the audience that you're trying to connect with. These 5 forces are so important. It's these 5 forces that should be rooted in every single piece of content that you develop and should be rooted in your thinking. Another thing that organizations need to embrace when it comes to creating content worth sharing is this concept that we call the 3 E's. The 3 E's are built around a simple idea of creating content that educates, engages, and entertains people. And if you can produce content that falls into these categories, you will be successful and you will be one step closer to creating a piece of content that your audience is actually going to view as being valuable. When we talk about educating, we're talking about providing people with information and insight of things they didn't know before. When we're talking about engaging, we're talking about opening up a dialogue so you can create content that stirs up comments in a bit of a two-way relationship between you and the reader. And then finally, entertaining. And when we talk about entertaining, we're not just talking about content that puts a smile on your face, but also content that might motivate someone, that might make someone feel some type of emotion in a way that ultimately provides them with a thrill and an idea that they need to come back to your stories in the future. These are the things that ultimately allow you to ensure that the content that you're producing is content that is worth distributing. Most brands press publish on content every single year. Some even every month, and yes, some every week, and some, yes, even every single day. You might have already pressed publish on multiple blog posts, ebooks, white papers, and guides over the last few months. That is very common. Some of that content was great, right? It drove traffic, it drove links, and some of it probably got tons of social media shares. But it's still possible that even with this success, that some of these pieces of content didn't reach their full potential. And that's what we're going to change. We're going to give you the insight that you need to figure out exactly what content had the opportunity to take off but didn't live up to its full potential. But to do so, we need to first find out exactly what content has that potential and how you can take that asset that you've already invested in and drive results from it. This effort requires an audit. An internal content audit is the practice of analyzing the content marketing situation in front of you and your brand. It's the process of taking a close look at the data associated with the various pieces that you have published and the metrics that have come out of their existence in your content marketing mix. It's important to run a marketing audit because it's in this process that you're able to identify the pieces of content that are worth leveraging. I always say, what you're looking for in this audit is content that actually has demonstrated content market fit. That is, the market has demonstrated and communicated through its actions that yes, this content is something that we're interested in, this is content that we want. Here are some of the signals that you should be looking for in your audit. You need to be looking for referral traffic, organic traffic, social shares, backlinks, leads, and the total number of sales that came directly on the back of an asset. The way you audit this effort starts with a simple data gathering exercise where you're going to gather all of the URLs of the pieces that you have published in the past. I've included a handout file in the exercise file folder that you can use to run this analysis on your own. It's easy to use and it's easy to think about and should be a great way for you to unlock the insights that you need to clearly identify the content that is worth sharing and repurposing. When you gather all of these URLs, you're going to export the traffic volume associated with these various assets from your favorite search engine or traffic analytics tool. You're going to place these numbers directly in a spreadsheet for these pieces: referral traffic, organic traffic, and social traffic. The reason you're doing this is because you need to see what content is generating the most results and the most traction with your audience through different sources. You want to see what content people really love, but you're not going to end there. You're also going to leverage things like BuzzSumo, a tool that helps you figure out what content is resonating on social media channels as well. This is one of my favorite tools. You can place a URL in their Content Explorer tool and within seconds be met with the number of shares that an asset has generated on the various social media networking sites that they have data on. This is valuable because now you're able to get clarity around what content resonated on what different channels and have insights into the idea that maybe it's worth sharing this piece of content again on this specific channel. Or maybe you'll realize that a certain piece of content didn't get any love on a specific channel and thus it is time to reshare it on that channel one more time. Remember, the people who were online at 2 p.m. on that random Tuesday 3 months ago when you pressed publish on that piece of content that you shared months ago aren't exactly going to be the same people who are online when you share this again for the second time. That is why we constantly embrace that idea of creating a piece of content once but distributing it forever. Now, at this point you should have clarity on exactly what type of content you have published that has generated traffic, generated sales, generated leads, generated results. This means you have identified your MVP, your most valuable piece of content. This is a great starting point for identifying the content that you should be sharing and amplifying clearly because this content has interest from the market. It has content market fit. And this should help you understand what content you should reshare, what content you should repurpose, and what content might actually be worth leaving alone. When you think of this content, I think it's important that you view this asset as a pillar asset. A pillar asset being a piece of content that demonstrated content market fit. A piece of content that you will want to distribute and promote and amplify for months to come. You probably have a handful of your favorite pieces of content of all time in your bookmarks. Some of them you probably haven't looked at in years, but you can still remember a thing or two from that blog post, that ebook, that essay, or that white paper that had a meaningful impact on your life or your career. These pieces stand the test of time, and these pieces are pillar assets. Pillar assets are pieces of content that can add value to the lives of others for months online, sometimes even years. And it's my hope that in this movie we'll talk about exactly how you can identify these assets. One of my favorite genres of books is nonfiction. But within nonfiction, you will find a lot of different ways in which authors structure their stories. The structure that these authors use can range from good old-fashioned hero's journey all the way through to embracing a structure that feels more like a university textbook. But one of my favorite formats is the structure in which every chapter is built to tell an isolated story and deliver a singular point. This makes it easy to just pick up a book and find a chapter that matters and not being required to read the chapter that may or may not have come before it. The same format is what goes into a great pillar asset. A pillar asset is a piece of content that can add value to the lives of others for months online, sometimes even years. Pillar assets from a marketing lens require the ability to be repurposed, reshared, remixed in the future. A pillar asset also needs to be something that people will actually really want to read and something that they have interest in reading. And a few ways that you can ensure that the content that you're developing is in fact a pillar asset are rooted in 3 fundamental questions. Is this content that you're about to create in demand? Is this content that you're going to develop going to solve a problem that will be around for years? And how complex is the problem in which you're trying to solve? When you start with these 3 questions, it sets you up for success to identify a pillar asset that you should be creating it. Let's talk a little bit about each of these. The idea around demand in your content is going to help you figure out whether or not this piece should be created. A few ways to understand if a piece is currently in demand is to study search behavior. Are people going to Google and looking for this type of content? Study the communities the people that you're trying to connect with are spending time in. Are they talking about this problem? Are they talking about how they wish this asset existed? While also studying long-term trends. Is this something that is fundamentally going to change the way that your audience exists and operates? When you're studying these different things, you're looking for things like high volume of people looking for certain items. When you're going into these communities, you're looking to see if there's a topic that shows up time and time again. And when you're looking at long-term trends, you're trying to figure out if there is a growth curve surrounding the way in which people are striving to get information on a topic. Now, you also want to think about the longevity of the content that you're creating. A great pillar asset can last a long time. So you have to make sure that it's not breaking news. You have to make sure that it's not reacting to something that just happened to be going on in the market today. And you have to ensure that it's not just about an isolated event that will no longer be relevant to your audience in a few months' time. These are the questions that you need to ask to ensure that your content lasts a very long time. Now, the final piece is ensuring that the content that you're creating is built in sections, that it is kind of covering a complex topic, something that can be outlined in multiple different ways, where you can actually incorporate charts and instructions on how to do different things in different ways. All of these things are important. How many different ideas exist inside of this asset? Because if there are a few, then you probably have an asset that will be able to be repurposed and repackaged in multiple ways. Now, what I want to talk about is an example of how you could create a pillar asset. Let's say we developed an asset that was titled How to Become a LinkedIn Influencer. We could very easily develop 4 sections within that asset. One dedicated to getting started with your LinkedIn profile, one dedicated to how to manage your account, another on how to build your following on LinkedIn, and then the 4th could be on the ideal content mix that you should be using on LinkedIn. All of these different sections should have isolated value, and the idea of becoming a LinkedIn influencer is something that people will probably want to be for a very long time. So, now that you have a structure for this repurposing pillar asset, the next step is to do that, to repurpose it. So you're going to take certain elements from within this piece of content, this pillar asset that you've developed, and you're going to turn it into a long-form video. That long-form video is then going to be having the audio extracted from it, and then you're going to look for a few 30-second, 40-second clips within it that can also be developed, all out of one single section of this pillar asset. You see, in the pillar asset where you're talking about getting started with your LinkedIn profile, you might be talking about your profile picture, you might be talking about your bio. And all of these different things are going to require a little bit of content, and every single piece of that little bit of content, you can develop a new asset, all from one pillar asset. But it doesn't end there. You can also look at that section on how to build a following on LinkedIn and turn that into an isolated individual status update that tells people how they too can build a following on LinkedIn. It's by leveraging these strategies that you are able to create pillar assets and that you can identify ways in which you can repurpose those assets for months, if not years, to come. Imagine this. You're hungry. You're like really, really hungry. And you're craving sushi. You walk down the street and you see a great vegan barbecue restaurant. They have signs in the window about their plant-based ribs, their delicious mac and faux cheese, and their barbecue sauce is apparently amazing. You walk in, you go up to the front desk, and you ask for a large order of 12 salmon maki rolls. What do you think would happen? They would look at you like you had two heads, right? But this is also what happens when you distribute your content in places that it just doesn't belong. You take that blog post, that video, that podcast you've created, and you share it in a place where you think your audience is going to love it, but instead of being met with love and comments, you're met with silence. This is why content alignment is so important. Content alignment is when you have the confidence that the audience you're looking to connect with are the right people to consume the content that you have produced, and you know exactly where they're spending time. It's the alignment that is required to ensure that the pieces of content that you share in a community are actually going to resonate. You need to ensure that the content that you are sharing is rooted in the pains and the problems that they're looking to solve. Content alignment is the moment in which you have confidence that the content you're going to share is right for the channel you're looking to spread it in and the people who are spending time on that channel day in and day out. That's the key for alignment. So how do you find it? You need to start by having a deep understanding of your audience. You need to start by knowing clearly who it is you're trying to reach, and from there, diving deep to understand what channels these individuals are spending time on. Good distribution is when you consistently drive results from a channel. Sometimes it might be expensive, sometimes it might have a lot of competition, but you know it's going to work because you have alignment. This is why you need to embrace a distribution framework. A distribution framework is rooted in the 4 different categories in which you can share your content as it relates to channels. There are rocket channels, there are money channels, ghost channels, and questionable channels. Here's how I like to think about them. First, we have our rocket channels. Rocket channels are the channels that have the potential to take off and unlock unprecedented growth. These are the channels where your audience is spending tons of time, but your competition has written it off as being a little bit too risky, or a channel that has significant barriers to entry for you and your organization to unlock. These barriers could be regulatory or directly related to access in the form of partners or marketplaces. This is a rocket ship channel. Then we have money channels. Money channels are where you're already seeing a lot of your competition generating results. You're able to do the same consistently. These are channels that have great consistent returns, but also have channels within this quadrant that may force you to pay to play because you have unlocked some great content market fit in these channels and on these spaces. In addition to that, we have ghost channels. These are channels that don't provide access to your ideal audience, and they're not even being used by your competition. These channels can unlock open opportunities, but it's very difficult sometimes to use them to scale until they broaden their reach with your target audience, and you can actually gain insight to know how you can leverage them. Sure, don't get me wrong, you might be able to get in there early and unlock an advantage, but there comes a significant amount of risk using a channel that isn't being used by your audience or your competition. The final channel are those questionable ones. Channels that are saturated with tons of competition, but they actually have quite a low engagement rate with your target audience. You're questionable around why your competition is there because they're still there. And you have to ask yourself, are they there because of switching costs? Are they there because of outdated practices? Or maybe uninformed decision making? These are channels that you sometimes kind of just want to avoid and make sure you're not there. So, those are the 4 channels. Out of all of these channels, there's no question that rocket channels can present the most opportunity. But money channels are also extremely valuable because they can deliver results time in and time out. The rocket channels are kind of like the Airbnb act of using Craigslist to spread their listings, or Buffer's founders unit using the preferred agency program. All of these different things can be leveraged to really tell your story and unlock unprecedented growth. There are a few things that you need to consider before you pick the right channel and the right opportunity for you, such as engagement quality. How engaged are people in this community, and is it high quality engagement? What are the barriers to entry and use this platform? What's the potential new audience that could exist on this platform? What's the average cost per result? How competitive is it? And what is our brand perception going to be by us having a presence here? All of these things need to be considered when you are figuring out the distribution framework that works for your brand and can be applied to your industry. Once you know the channels that are going to work best for you, the next step is to figure out what goes into those channels and how you can use it to distribute your stories. It's possible for you that Reddit is considered a rocket ship, LinkedIn a money channel, MySpace a ghost channel, and magazines a questionable channel. Once you've figured these things out, the next step is to gain clarity on how you can use these channels to spread your stories. You will find a handout that includes this exact chart that goes along with this movie. Feel free to download it and start putting together details required to help figure out where your content should be spread. It was 1997. My family and I were on a trip to Montreal, Canada, but back then, Google Maps didn't exist, Apple Maps not a thing. I don't even think MapQuest was a thing at that point. But I do know that on our trip we took a wrong turn and we ended up in the middle of nowhere for about 4 hours, and me and my sister were convinced that we were going to end up at the North Pole because there was nothing but snow around us. We eventually found our way to a gas station. We got a map and we made it to our way to Montreal, 4 hours behind schedule. Thank goodness for maps. Maps are a great way for travel, but they're also a great way for understanding your own process for how you get where you want to be. When it comes to content distribution, we all know what our goal is. We want more people, the right people, to consume our content. And a content map provides us with a path in which an asset is distributed to ensure that we're driving the success that we need. We are able, through content distribution and through a content map, ensure that the content that we're producing doesn't live and die the day in which it's published, but instead it is able to reach people on the channels they're spending time and drive meaningful business results for us. So let's talk about how you can create a distribution map for your company or for yourself. It starts by understanding. It all comes down to what the asset is that you're creating. Once you've identified the asset that you're creating, you then need to share that asset, and you need to share it in a few different places. Ideally on your accounts, maybe in communities, and maybe with a few friendlies, some people who you've gotten to know over the years and who you have a relationship with. On your accounts, you might be just putting up an individual post on something like Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Inside of communities where your audience is spending time, you might share another post inside of a LinkedIn group, inside of a Facebook group, or maybe even inside of a private Slack group where your industry is spending time every day talking about industry things. You might even send a DM to a few of your friends, or sponsor an email newsletter where you know your audience is spending time, or use your own newsletter to get it in front of the people who you've connected with over the years. You're also going to potentially share it on an internal company Slack channel, or inside of a Teams account, or an intranet that you use to communicate with your organization. All of these efforts are going to share that content, and those sharing efforts are ultimately going to drive more people back to it. But that's not it for a distribution map. There's also the possibility of reposting that content in new places to reach a new audience. The people who didn't see your piece go live on your own website, but will see it go live on another one. That is when you go to channels like LinkedIn and you upload an entire new article directly to LinkedIn, or you repost on medium.com, or you take the content and you repost it as a full text post on Reddit. These reposts give your content new life on a new channel. You also have the ability to remix or repurpose, two words, same thing, the content in a different format. Can you turn that blog post into a LinkedIn slide carousel? Can you turn it into an Instagram carousel? Can you turn it into a video? There are so many different ways that you can go when it comes to your content. And the map that you create is really going to depend on the channels in which you've determined. You should now have some clarity on how to determine what channels your content is likely to spread on. And we've included this chart so you can actually export it yourself and use it in the handouts so you can develop your own distribution map. Because every distribution map is going to be different. A B2B team's distribution map is going to be different from a B2C team, and a solopreneur's distribution map is going to be different from someone who is creating a distribution map for an entire massive organization. So feel free to download it and use it to put together the details that will make up your distribution map as well. Once you've identified those efforts and you know the channels in which you need to be and how you're going to distribute your stories, it's important that you study the various channel levers that you can pull. These are the specifics. These are the levers in which you're going to be able to pull to drive results. It's great to say you're going to use LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and blogging, etc., but you need to be specific to say how you're going to use these channels. You will find a workbook with this movie as well that gives you not only your ability to create your own content map, but also a list of the various ways that you can distribute your content online. Take these and use them as inspiration to help you determine what your content map will look like, but also what levers you should pull on different channels. And once you've identified those levers, it's time to start mapping out and thinking about how frequently those levers will be pulled. You need to think about how you should be creating and distributing these pieces of content every single week, every single month, and maybe every single year. Because you know the saying, you create once and you distribute this content forever. Over the course of history, humans have embraced the remix. Most people don't realize it, but a lot of the most famous, popular stories of our generation have come from stories of prior generations. Avatar is eerily similar to Pocahontas. Lion King is very similar to Hamlet. Or one of my favorites, West Side Story, very, very similar to Romeo and Juliet. Yet for some reason, we often ignore our own greatest hits when it comes to content marketing. We don't take our own greatest hits and repurpose them, remix them, and turn them into something new. The first thing that you need to do to identify what content you should be remixing and repurposing is to do a bit of a reflection. A reflection to understand your circle of competence, the time resources, and the financial resources that you have at your disposal. These are the key to figuring out the right repurposing strategy for you. When it comes to your circle of competence, you need to figure out whether or not you actually have the experience to distribute and repurpose your content in the way in which you're talking about. Someone who has very little video experience is probably not going to spend a ton of time investing in creating video assets. Sure, you can go into LinkedIn Learning and learn a handful about video editing, but that's going to take time. Which is the second thing that you need to reflect on. How much time do you or your team really have to learn about how to repurpose your content? Or to actually repurpose your content? How much time is available for you or your team? And if the time isn't there, you might need to outsource this, which takes it to the third step, which is financial resources. Should you hire a content distribution agency or a marketing freelancer who can assist with this? Or do you need to hire a content distributor who's going to spend the vast majority of their time dedicated to repurposing your content? And if you can say with confidence that you have time or the money, the next step is to figuring out what type of content you should be repurposing. And I always say there are two primary types of content that every organization should be encouraged to repurpose: video content and written content. These two types of content are the easiest to repurpose because you can take so many different elements out of them and turn them into something new. Whether it's a long-form video or a long-form written blog post, these assets give you a lot of different sections that are filled with educational, engaging, and entertaining stories that you can repurpose and remix. So let's get tactical and talk about how we could do this on LinkedIn. That video content that you recorded that was an interview, you can take that asset and reshare it as well. That interview that your executive gave on another podcast, you can add animation to it and reshare that as a video that goes out on your social media accounts. If there's a section in a blog post that you developed that can be turned into a status update, do it. But it doesn't end there. Take a section of it and turn it into a long-form status update as well that actually incorporates a PDF that is uploaded as a document. Upload that to LinkedIn and it will take on a carousel format that people might love. Take the data from a long-form piece that you have developed or that you reference in a video and create another update that is solely dedicated directly to this specific point, this specific stat. Take that long-form blog post that you developed and re-upload it as an entire LinkedIn article. This is important because it gives you that second boost of reach. It gives you reach on a channel where it's very likely your audience spends time, and you're able to give them the opportunity to connect with your brand. But it doesn't end there. Those blog posts can eventually become video. And those videos can be shared on a variety of different channels, speaking to the same point and the same message from that very first blog post that you developed. This is a huge win, not only because it's giving you more attention, but because that video is now an asset that you can start to repurpose and reuse all over again. You can embed this video into a blog post that is already ranking. You can embed it into a blog post that it was already built off of. That same video can be chopped into clips and reshared all over again. Put lightly, the cycle begins again. This is the power of repurposing. One asset can be used and repurposed 500 different ways. One asset can be repurposed into a bunch of different assets, and those assets can become more assets. Now you've repurposed these assets enough, and the only step remaining is simple: share them effectively. It happens every single day. Companies press publish on a new blog post, companies press publish on a new white paper, or people press publish on a new landing page. And they start running around the office in real life or virtually, giving each other an applause for a job well done. That's the end of the job. They've pressed publish on a piece of content and they think the job is done. This happens every single day. But it's not the way. It's not the way that it should be done. The way it should be done is this: you need to share and reshare your content. You need to reshare it again and again and again. Why? Because content shouldn't live and die on the day in which it is published. Content should be distributed and shared consistently. There are a few key reasons. One, you can generate more reach and engagement. Different audiences are online at different times. Global audiences are on different time zones, and different messages with the same content are going to resonate with people differently. Once you recognize these four realities, it becomes easier to get over that hesitation to reshare your content. But time and time again, I'm often met with a few common excuses by marketing teams for why they don't want to share their content. And I have to tell you, you cannot allow the fear of being judged stop you from distributing your content. Most people don't want to reshare their content because they think everyone saw it the first time. They think people are going to unfollow them if they share the same piece of content 2 weeks in a row. This is a common rebuttal for resharing, and I 100% get why this could be a fear that you have. But I truly want you to remember this: if the content that you're amplifying is valuable, then the audience that you are trying to connect with isn't going to unfollow you for giving them too much value. No one gets unfollowed for adding too much value. So don't hesitate in your decision to reshare content. Promote assets that you believe are truly valuable to your audience and strive to get more eyeballs on the stories that you believe are going to help them. Now I know what some of you might be thinking. Ross, this is a lot of work. I hear you. But since you've been watching this movie, I think I'd probably send a one tweet, shared a LinkedIn post, and maybe send 20 or 30 emails to people who have engaged with my content with a link of something that is valuable from my company. How? Content scheduling. Across most social media platforms, you can actually schedule your content to be shared natively. A lot of these sites offer you the ability to post later rather than always having to be online when you press publish. This makes it easier to be a bit more productive and ensure that you're not filling your followers' feeds up with content all the time within the 5-minute span. It allows you to spread it out a bit. And this is great because you can schedule your content to go out on holidays. And while everyone will think you're there, you're online, you're actually hanging out with family and friends. It's a win-win. Your audience gets entertaining, educational, and engaging content while you get to do other things. Let me give you a quick glimpse into one of my favorite tools, Buffer. Buffer is a content scheduling software that helps you schedule content that you have created years and months in advance. In fact, I have a post scheduled to go live in the year 2095. It just says boo, and it's going to scare everyone. But seriously, it's a great service for scheduling your content in advance. You simply find the piece of content that you want to reshare, you click the buffer button, which is going to be within your browser, and within seconds you're going to be met with the screen that gives you the opportunity to select what channel you want to publish it on and what caption you want to include. Buffer works across almost every social media site. It's lightweight, easy to use, and affordable. Once you've signed up for a social media scheduling tool like Buffer, you're off into the races and you're ready to schedule your content. One of the things I like most about tools like Buffer is that they let you figure out when your audience is most active and ensure that you're scheduling content at that time. Whether it's the morning, the afternoon, the evening, or the weekend, you can schedule your content when your audience is on time. This is a great way to ensure that you're unlocking content marketing success through resharing. Embrace the tools, embrace analytics, and embrace the idea of creating something once, but distributing it forever. The content distribution engine is a cohesive look at the various moving parts that go into the way in which you manage the process from publish to amplification. It's very much rooted in the way that you operate and manage your energy as an organization or an individual after you press publish. No matter if you're a one-person shop or an organization with 50 plus people on your marketing team, the distribution engine is the series of steps that you take after pressing publish to ensure that you're getting results from the content that you've been developing. It's not just channels and formats either. The distribution engine outlines the roles and responsibilities as well as the timelines and efforts that are required by people to actually ensure that your content is spreading. If you have a one-person shop, your distribution engine might look a little like this, where it's just one person doing all the things. But it's on you to figure out within your organization who is the best person to actually manage and execute different things. You need to figure out who is going to be responsible for creating the original asset. And are they the same person who should be sending out the tweets and publishing it on LinkedIn? Is the same person who's managing your communities the person who should be reposting your content on Medium? And is the person who's reposting on Medium the same person who should be remixing and repurposing content that started as a video asset and turning it into a handful of clips that can be shared on social? It really starts by understanding your existing business structure and how your marketing function operates internally. The best content marketing engines that I've seen have either leveraged a deep, in-depth content marketing team in-house, or they have leveraged experts externally who have deep experience in content distribution. The key is understanding your situation, because with both of those different options come different pros and cons. From a flexibility standpoint, an expertise standpoint, availability, scalability, and cultural benefits, there's a lot of different pros and cons that you need to consider. From a flexibility standpoint, it's very easy to move and adjust quickly when you have an in-house expert. An agency might have challenges changing quickly if it's a strategy or a tactic that's not in scope, or you haven't established a relationship where wiggle room for making those adjustments is available. On the expertise side, it's not easy to build this expertise in-house. The idea of a content distributor as a role is still very new. It's a powerful role, an important role, but one that doesn't come easily. Agencies are oftentimes the best way to get access to this skill set because it's sometimes a role that a lot of people inside of an agency have established organically, working on multiple accounts. Availability is also a key piece of this. If you've never done content distribution before and you want to start today, it's unlikely that you could hire an agency to start tomorrow. But it's very possible that you could put your social media manager or someone else in your team with the raw skill set through a LinkedIn learning session just like this, and by next week, they'd be able to hit the ground running with content distribution. The scalability is also a key factor. It's a lot easier to scale an agency partner with a ton of different assets versus scaling individual people who work in-house. You see, if you need 20 or 10 different assets developed every single month, you might need a handful of different content distributors. And if you have a handful of content distributors, they're probably going to need to report to a director of distribution. There are cultural benefits as well that come with both agency and in-house resourcing. When you make the decision to bring in an agency, the cultural benefit is that your team is now going to be able to learn and elevate themselves due to the fact that an expert is coming in and helping them learn. When you make the decision to train someone internally, the opportunity is endless because this person could very well have a massive impact on the way that your organization thinks and operates. So when you think about your distribution engine and you're trying to figure out the resourcing and the people that you bring in to execute, be sure to think about the pros and cons across all of these different factors. And once you've done that and you have clarity on what your engine should look like, it's time to start thinking about time. It's time to start thinking about the amount of time that it takes to do various tasks and mapping that with a cadence that aligns with your existing resources. I've included a handout with this movie that will make it easy for you to tailor your distribution engine to your situation. You will have to determine how much time it takes you or your team or an agency to tackle the different tasks that you need to leverage to achieve content distribution excellence. This is how you plan the life cycle for your content after you press publish and ensure that your content doesn't collect dust. Imagine what it would be like to watch a competitive game of basketball for the championship, but no one was allowed to keep track of the score. Players would be exhausted, coaches would be furious, and fans would probably leave because the game would just continue over and over again and never end. That's what happens when you don't pay attention to the results of your distribution engine as well. If you're not tracking referral traffic, social media traffic, follower traffic, leads from social, the amount of email subscribers you're generating, or any type of attributable metric associated with your business like sales or signups associated with content you're distributing, you are doing the exact same thing. You're playing the distribution game without keeping score. You might get results, you might be failing massively, but you don't really know because you're not embracing data. This is why you need to monitor the analytics associated with the various channels you're distributing content on. There are two main reasons. It helps you figure out what content's performing best, and it gives you the ability to get a holistic understanding of the ROI of your distribution engine. The ability to know what content to promote or is performing well is a superpower in marketing. It helps you know what things can be repurposed even further, or what should be reshared in the future. If you notice in a report that a certain asset generated 10x the amount of results of other pieces, it's important for your team to know this because it's going to help them with a better strategy moving forward. In almost every social media platform, you have the ability to see analytics surrounding the content that you are publishing. And if you're unable to access this data surrounding the various social media networks that you're using, you can always use third-party solutions that will help you get a better glimpse into an aggregated dashboard that shows you how you're doing in terms of your content as well as in comparison to your competition. These tools are called social media analytics platforms, and you can find a plethora of different solutions online that you can use across a handful of different networks to gain insight into what is working and what is not. One of my favorite reports is a report that actually gives you insight into the content that is being distributed versus the content that is not being distributed. Simply showing this comparison of the types of assets, the types of blog posts that were distributed as a part of your distribution engine versus those that were not should give you the insight and information you need to say, look, content distribution is working for us. In an analysis that we recently conducted, we found that content that was being distributed actually could generate up to 10 times more page views than other content. These are the types of reports that you can pull if you embrace analytics. One of the things that you always want to leverage when it comes to analytics is going back into time. You want to look back into time at data surrounding the content that you have produced. Why? Because 1 year ago, 4 months ago, 3 quarters ago, it's very possible that your website's seen a massive spike from 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 pieces of content that you are now overlooking. It's very possible that if you press publish on that piece of content that happened to generate a lot of traction way back in 2020, it could in fact generate more engagement in 2030, 2040, 2050, 2060, and beyond. The only way to uncover these amazing opportunities is to go deep into analytics and look at your past, is to figure out what pieces of content you produced in the past that generated those spikes, that were those outliers, so to speak, and potentially in the future incorporate them as a new asset that you can repurpose, reuse, and reshare. You are looking for existing pillar assets that you can share in your content marketing engine. That is the power of analytics. As you leverage analytics, you will learn a lot, not just about the content that you've already published, but also your audience. And this is the best part of the process. It's a never-ending experiment where you get to dive deep into the data and let data assist in helping you understand what content your audience wants, what content has content market fit, and what content is truly going to help you achieve the results that you're looking for. Remember, a great content distribution engine is rooted in finding channels where your audience is spending time, and analytics can support that. It's also rooted in the idea of distributing stories that connect with people in a meaningful way, and analytics will assist in understanding that. Good content distribution is consistently rooted in experimentation, tinkering, analyzing, and amplifying. And if you can do those things consistently, month over month, week over week, I'm confident that you have a content distribution engine that drives results.